Tonight, CBS's Carter Evans reports from the country's busiest ports. Starting today, all cargo leaving China and headed for the U.S. will face a 30% tariff. Some are saying the ports of Los Angeles and Seattle are nearly empty. There are few shipping containers, and activity has slowed dramatically. At the Port of Los Angeles, one of the busiest in the U.S., the usual traffic is noticeably reduced. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, dozens of cargo ships remain anchored offshore, waiting. But here in the U.S., at ports like Los Angeles and Seattle, vessel traffic has dropped significantly. Over 50,000 containers disappeared from U.S. ports in April 2025 alone. At Seattle's port, no container ships have docked in recent days. At Los Angeles and Long Beach, vessel traffic is down by as much as 44% compared to last year. This is not just a temporary slowdown, it signals a potential supply chain crisis. Meanwhile, American consumers are seeing prices for food and everyday goods increase by 8 to 12%. Imports are decreasing, major companies are pausing shipments, and retailers are raising concerns about inventory shortages. At the center of this situation is a controversial policy: President Donald Trump's tariffs, reinstated and expanded during his current term. Trump argues that reducing imports from China means losing less money to them. However, the reality is quite different. Americans are paying more for fewer goods. Trump stated, "When we stop importing from China, we lose less money." He also mentioned that China was making around $1.1 trillion in trade with the U.S., implying the U.S. would be better off without that business. So what's causing the ports to be empty? Businesses hesitant, consumers frustrated, and the economy slowing. Here are 5 key consequences of this tariff policy and warnings if no corrective measures are taken. When President Trump returned to office, he quickly reinstated and expanded his aggressive tariffs. These included a 145% tariff on some Chinese goods, 25% on imports from Mexico and Canada, and 10% on products from over 40 other countries. According to a Los Angeles Times report from May 2025, the stated goals were to protect American manufacturing, reduce the trade deficit, and keep money in the U.S. However, the idea that reducing imports saves money has been widely criticized by economists. Trump's logic, that if the U.S. doesn't buy from China, it won't lose money to them, sounds appealing to some but contradicts basic economics. When supply decreases but demand remains, prices inevitably rise. With fewer imports, U.S. companies lose access to essential materials and components. This forces businesses to raise prices, cut production, or even pause operations. Ultimately, American consumers bear the cost. Businesses don't absorb tariffs. They pass them on to consumers through higher prices to maintain profit margins and satisfy shareholders. This makes imported goods more expensive and often less accessible, especially for middle and lower-income families. Despite these facts, Trump continues to claim consumers don't pay the tariffs, but rising grocery prices tell a different story. These misleading statements confuse the public and harm business confidence. When economic decisions are driven by politics rather than market realities, businesses and investors lose faith in policy stability. One of the clearest effects of Trump's tariff policy has been the sharp slowdown at U.S. ports, vital to the national economy. Data from the Port of Los Angeles show that by the end of April 2025, vessel traffic at the Los Angeles and Long Beach ports had fallen 44% compared to the previous year. Seattle's port experienced several consecutive days without a single container ship docking, a situation unseen for over a decade. This drastic drop in shipping has hurt workers and businesses. Longshoremen have little cargo to unload, while truck drivers and warehouse employees face layoffs or unpaid leave. Logistics firms are struggling with delays, creating bottlenecks throughout the supply chain. Industry experts warn that empty ports today mean a growing crisis ahead. Shelves could be empty in 2 to 3 weeks. The implications are clear. When imports stop at the ports, domestic distribution becomes severely constrained along transportation routes. This is especially true for consumer goods, electronics, auto parts, and pharmaceuticals, many of which come from Asia and rely on steady port traffic to reach U.S. markets. At the same time, CEOs from major retail companies have announced suspensions of imports due to high tariff costs and ongoing uncertainty about trade policies. Many are pausing operations rather than risking unpredictable price increases or shipping delays. As one executive said, "We're standing still waiting for the next move." This climate of hesitation and unclear policy is already affecting business planning and investment. Economically, ports are more than infrastructure. They are real-time indicators of commercial activity. If port activity slows or stops, it signals a broader slowdown in trade and market activity. When America's ports become quiet, the effects ripple quickly through the economy, from global supply chains all the way to consumer shelves. The sweeping tariff policies have not only disrupted port operations, but also triggered a ripple effect across the wider economic ecosystem, especially impacting businesses and consumers. According to recent reports from Axios and U.S. funds, CEOs across major industries in the U.S. are responding similarly. Many have paused imports while awaiting clearer trade policy. Investment in supply chains, machinery, and distribution infrastructure has largely been frozen. Hiring has slowed, particularly in sectors like logistics, retail, manufacturing, and assembly. Several companies report that tariff increases between 10 to 25% have forced them to revise sourcing strategies, adjust product prices, or even cancel import contracts planned months earlier. This uncertainty is making it difficult for companies to operate confidently. The consumer market is reacting as retailers pass tariff costs to customers, leading to price increases of 8 to 12% on a wide range of goods over the past 2 months. Consumers feel this impact most at checkout, with higher prices on groceries, electronics, and household items. Products sourced from Asia, especially China and Southeast Asia, are becoming scarcer on store shelves, limiting choices and driving prices even higher. Beyond rising costs, the most serious impact may be psychological and strategic. Businesses are losing trust in U.S. policy stability. With trade regulations changing rapidly and unpredictably, companies struggle to make long-term decisions about production, hiring, or expansion. Global firms are reconsidering their presence in the U.S., citing a volatile tax environment, rising operational costs, and an increasingly politicized business climate. What was once seen as a safe and profitable market is now viewed by some as high risk and unstable. The consequences extend beyond short-term profit loss. This environment threatens to erode U.S. competitiveness in the long run. While other economies like the European Union and South Korea expand free trade agreements, many American businesses are pulling back from global markets, not because they cannot compete, but because they no longer trust the rules at home. Although the administration argues that tariffs are meant to punish foreign exporters, it is American consumers who bear the direct consequences. Reports from Axios and CNN indicate that in April and early May 2025, prices on essential goods have risen 8 to 12%. Staple items such as rice, flour, computer components, and lithium batteries many heavily imported from Asia, have seen even steeper price increases, sometimes reaching 15 to 20% due to supply shortages. For most Americans, this inflation is not an abstract economic trend. It is evident in their weekly grocery bills as a real loss of purchasing power. Even as the Federal Reserve maintains steady monetary policy, import tariffs are raising input costs, triggering cost push inflation, one of the hardest types of inflation to control. This price pressure stems not from excess demand, but from rising production and sourcing costs, especially for imported goods. This is particularly harmful to working class and middle income families, whose financial stability was already weakened by the pandemic. These households now face the reality of paying more for the same products or, worse, finding them unavailable due to shortages. Despite these facts, President Trump continues to claim that tariffs are not paid by consumers and that prices are falling. In reality, Americans are paying more, not due to natural market cycles, but because of a trade conflict they did not choose and one whose burden disproportionately affects their wallets. This situation is more than an economic issue. It is fueling growing frustration, supply anxieties, and pushing the economy toward stagnation. From idle ports and delayed business investments to rising grocery bills, the message is clear. Tariffs alone are not an effective economic tool without a comprehensive industrial strategy to support them. While the administration frames the policy under the slogan America First, in practice it is weakening domestic capacity, disrupting supply chains, and shifting costs onto the very people it aims to protect. Tariffs are not inherently flawed, but unilateral tariffs imposed without preparation or paired investment in domestic production risk making the U.S. an unpredictable business environment, an unreliable trade partner, and a less affordable place to live.